When people look at the Middle East today, the region often appears trapped in endless conflict. News headlines speak of missile exchanges between Israel and Iran, militias fighting in Syria and Iraq, and deep political rivalries stretching across the region. Tensions between Iran and Saudi Arabia continue to shape regional alliances, while Western governments debate how to respond to Iran's growing influence. To many observers, these conflicts appear to be the result of modern political decisions. They seem like disputes created by recent governments, ideological disagreements, or geopolitical competition over oil, security, and influence. But the deeper reality is far more complex. The conflicts shaping the Middle East today are not simply modern political struggles. They are the latest chapter in a story that began more than 2,500 years ago. A story shaped by three powerful forces that have repeatedly defined the region: empire, religion, and identity. And at the center of that story lies one civilization that has repeatedly risen, fallen, and reinvented itself throughout history. That civilization is Iran. To understand Iran's role in the Middle East today, we must go back far beyond the modern state, far beyond the Islamic era to the early beginnings of Persian civilization. Around 2000 to 1500 BCE, groups known as the Indo-Iranian tribes began migrating south from the Eurasian steppes into the vast region now known as the Iranian Plateau. These tribes were part of a larger Indo-European cultural family, whose languages and traditions spread across much of Eurasia. Over time, two groups emerged as particularly influential in the region: the Medes and the Persians. By roughly 1000 BCE, the Medes had settled in the northwestern regions of the Iranian Plateau, near the Zagros Mountains. The Persians occupied the southern region known as Pars, which would later give the world the name Persia. At that time, the Middle East was dominated by one of the most powerful empires of the ancient world, the Assyrian Empire. Assyria ruled much of Mesopotamia and the Levant through military strength and fear. Its armies conquered cities across the region, and its rulers became known for their brutal campaigns. But even the most powerful empires eventually fall. In 612 BCE, an alliance between the Medes and the Babylonians attacked the Assyrian capital Nineveh. The city was destroyed, and the Assyrian Empire collapsed. The fall of Assyria created a massive power vacuum across the Middle East, and from that vacuum emerged one of the most influential rulers in world history. His name was Cyrus the Great. In 550 BCE, Cyrus led a rebellion against the Median king Astyages. The revolt succeeded, uniting the Medes and Persians under one ruler. This moment marked the birth of the Achaemenid Empire, the first Persian empire. Within a few decades, Persia would become the most powerful empire the Middle East had ever seen, and the legacy of that empire would continue to shape the region for thousands of years. Because the story of Iran, the story of empire, religion, and identity had only just begun. After the rise of Cyrus the Great in 550 BCE, the Persian world entered a new era. What began as a rebellion against Median rule quickly transformed into one of the most remarkable expansions of power in ancient history. Cyrus was not simply a tribal leader or regional king. He was a strategic visionary who understood how to build and manage a vast empire. After uniting the Medes and Persians, Cyrus began expanding his authority beyond the Iranian plateau. In 546 BCE, his army marched west and defeated the powerful kingdom of Lydia, located in what is now western Turkey. Lydia was famous for its wealth and for producing some of the first gold coins in the ancient world. With Lydia under Persian control, Cyrus gained access to the wealthy trade networks of Anatolia, but his greatest victory came only a few years later. In 539 BCE, Cyrus captured the legendary city of Babylon, one of the most important political and cultural centers of the ancient world. Unlike many conquerors of the era, Cyrus entered Babylon peacefully. According to historical records, he allowed local traditions and religious practices to continue. One of his most famous decisions allowed the Jewish population exiled in Babylon to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. Because of this policy, Cyrus became known as a ruler who practiced tolerance toward conquered peoples. After Cyrus died in 530 BCE, his empire passed to his successors, who continued expanding Persian power. One of the most important of these rulers was Darius I, who came to power in 522 BCE. Darius understood that ruling such a vast territory required more than military strength. He reorganized the empire into administrative regions known as satrapies, each governed by officials responsible for collecting taxes and maintaining order. To improve communication across the empire, Darius built an extensive network of roads. The most famous of these routes was the Royal Road, stretching nearly 2,700 kilometers from the Persian capital Susa to the city of Sardis in Anatolia. This system allowed messages to travel across the empire with remarkable speed. Around 518 BCE, Darius began constructing the magnificent ceremonial capital of Persepolis. The city was designed to showcase the power and diversity of the Persian Empire. Delegations from across the empire, including Egypt, Babylon, India, and Central Asia, traveled to Persepolis each year to bring tribute to the Persian king. At its height, the Achaemenid Empire stretched from Egypt in the west to the Indus Valley in the east, ruling millions of people across 3 continents. For the first time in history, the Middle East was unified under a single imperial authority. Persia had become the largest empire the world had ever seen, but such enormous power inevitably created powerful enemies. To the west, along the shores of the Mediterranean, a group of small but fiercely independent city-states was rising. They were the Greeks, and their confrontation with Persia would produce some of the most famous battles in ancient history. The struggle between Persia and the Greek world was about to begin. By the early 5th century BCE, the Persian Empire stood as the dominant power of the ancient world. Its territories stretched from the deserts of Egypt to the mountains of Central Asia, and its influence reached deep into the Mediterranean. But along the western frontier of the empire, tensions were rising. In 499 BCE, several Greek cities located in Anatolia, which were under Persian rule, rebelled against the empire in what became known as the Ionian Revolt. The rebellion received support from mainland Greek city-states, particularly Athens. Although the revolt was eventually crushed by Persian forces in 494 BCE, the involvement of Athens angered the Persian king Darius I. Determined to punish the Greeks, Darius launched a military expedition across the Aegean Sea. In 490 BCE, Persian forces landed near Athens at the Battle of Marathon. Despite being outnumbered, the Athenian army managed to defeat the Persians in a surprising victory that became legendary in Greek history. The defeat at Marathon did not end the conflict. 10 years later, Darius's son Xerxes I prepared a much larger invasion. In 480 BCE, Xerxes crossed into Greece with one of the largest armies ever assembled in the ancient world. One of the most famous moments of this invasion occurred at the Battle of Thermopylae, where a small Greek force led by King Leonidas of Sparta attempted to block the Persian advance. Although the Greeks were eventually defeated, their resistance became one of the most celebrated stories in Western history. The war continued for several years. Later, in 480 BCE, the Greek navy defeated the Persian fleet at the Battle of Salamis, and in 479 BCE, Persian forces were defeated again at the Battle of Plataea. These battles prevented Persia from conquering Greece, but they did not destroy the Persian Empire. For more than a century afterward, Persia remained one of the most powerful states in the world. However, internal political struggles slowly weakened the empire. Court rivalries, revolts in distant provinces, and competition among nobles began to erode central authority. Then, in the 4th century BCE, a new threat emerged. In the northern Greek kingdom of Macedon, a young king named Alexander inherited a powerful army from his father, Philip II. In 336 BCE, Alexander became king. Just 2 years later, in 334 BCE, he launched an invasion of the Persian Empire. Alexander proved to be one of the greatest military commanders in history. In 333 BCE, he defeated Persian forces led by King Darius III at the Battle of Issus. Then came the decisive confrontation. In 331 BCE, the two armies met again at the Battle of Gaugamela in Mesopotamia. Alexander's tactics shattered the Persian army, and Darius fled the battlefield. After the victory, Alexander captured the great Persian cities of Babylon, Susa, and finally Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the empire. In 330 BCE, Persepolis was burned, marking the symbolic end of the Achaemenid Empire. After more than 2 centuries of rule, the First Persian Empire had fallen. Yet the Persian identity did not disappear. Instead, it adapted, and in the centuries that followed, Persia would rise again, this time under a new empire that would once more challenge the greatest powers of the world. Although Alexander the Great destroyed the Achaemenid Empire in 330 BCE, Persian civilization did not disappear. After Alexander's sudden death in 323 BCE, his empire quickly fragmented among his generals. The territories of Persia eventually came under the control of the Seleucid Empire, one of the Hellenistic kingdoms that inherited parts of Alexander's domain. For nearly 2 centuries, Greek culture and administration spread across much of the Middle East. Greek cities were founded, and Greek became an important language of trade and government. But beneath this Hellenistic influence, Persian traditions and identity survived. In 247 BCE, a new Iranian power began to rise. A group known as the Parthians gradually took control of large parts of Iran and Mesopotamia, eventually replacing Seleucid rule. The Parthian Empire would dominate the region for nearly 500 years. The Parthians became one of the greatest rivals of the Roman Empire. One of the most famous moments of their rivalry came in 53 BCE, when Roman general Crassus led an army into Parthian territory. At the Battle of Carrhae, the Roman forces were decisively defeated, and Crassus himself was killed. This victory demonstrated that Persian powers could still challenge the greatest empires of the ancient world. Yet the Parthian Empire eventually declined. In 224 CE, a new Persian dynasty emerged under a ruler named Ardashir I, who founded the Sassanid Empire. The Sassanids viewed themselves as the heirs of ancient Persian kings. They revived many traditions of the earlier Achaemenid Empire and strengthened the relationship between the state and religion. Under the Sassanids, Zoroastrianism became the official religion of the empire. This ancient Persian faith centered on the teachings of the prophet Zarathustra and described the universe as a cosmic struggle between the forces of good and evil. For more than 4 centuries, the Sassanid Empire stood as one of the most powerful states in the world. Its main rival was the Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of the Roman Empire. The two powers fought repeated wars across the Middle East. One particularly devastating conflict lasted from 602 CE to 628 CE, exhausting both empires and leaving their armies weakened. Neither side realized that a new force was rising from the Arabian Peninsula. In 610 CE, a merchant named Muhammad began preaching a new religious message in the city of Mecca. His teachings would become the foundation of Islam. Within a few decades, the tribes of Arabia were united under this new faith. After Muhammad's death in 632 CE, Muslim armies began expanding beyond Arabia. In 636 CE, Arab forces confronted the Sassanid army at the Battle of Qadisiyah near the Euphrates River. The Persian army was defeated, opening the path into the Persian heartland. Over the next years, Muslim armies captured the great cities of the Sassanid Empire. Finally, in 651 CE, the last Sassanid king Yazdegerd III was killed. With his death, the Persian Empire collapsed once again. But this conquest brought a transformation even greater than political change. It brought Islam to Persia, and the arrival of this new religion would reshape Iranian identity for centuries to come. After the Arab conquest in 651 CE, Persia gradually became part of the Islamic world. Over the next centuries, most of the population adopted Islam, and Persian scholars, poets, and administrators played major roles in shaping Islamic civilization. Yet Persian cultural identity did not disappear. The Persian language flourished in literature and scholarship. One of the most famous works of Persian culture, the epic Shahnameh, was completed around 1010 CE by the poet Ferdowsi, preserving the legends and heroes of ancient Persia. For centuries, Persia remained politically fragmented, ruled by various dynasties and empires. But the most important transformation in Iranian identity would occur much later. In 1501, a young leader named Shah Ismail I captured the city of Tabriz and founded the Safavid Empire. This moment would permanently change the religious landscape of the Middle East. Shah Ismail made a radical decision. He declared Twelver Shia Islam the official religion of his new state. At that time, the vast majority of Muslims across the Middle East were Sunni. Shia communities existed, but they were relatively small minorities scattered across different regions. By establishing Shia Islam as the state religion, Shah Ismail transformed Iran into the center of the Shia world. This decision created a deep religious divide between Iran and its powerful Sunni neighbors. To the west stood the Ottoman Empire, one of the greatest Sunni powers in history. Conflict between the Safavids and the Ottomans quickly became inevitable. In 1514, the two empires clashed at the Battle of Chaldiran. The Ottomans, equipped with modern artillery and firearms, defeated the Safavid forces and temporarily captured Tabriz. Despite this defeat, the Safavid state survived and continued to strengthen. Over time, Safavid rulers promoted Shia religious institutions, built shrines and seminaries, and encouraged the spread of Shia theology throughout the country. One of the most powerful Safavid rulers, Shah Abbas I, came to power in 1588. He reorganized the army, strengthened central authority, and transformed the Safavid capital. In 1598, Shah Abbas moved the capital to Isfahan, which soon became one of the most magnificent cities in the world. European travelers visiting the city described it as one of the most beautiful urban centers they had ever seen. The famous Persian saying from that era declared, "Isfahan is half the world." Under Shah Abbas, the Safavid Empire became a major political and cultural power. But the most enduring legacy of the Safavids was not military or economic. It was religious. They had successfully created a Shia Iranian identity. Even after the Safavid Empire collapsed in 1736, this religious identity remained deeply rooted in Iranian society, and centuries later, it would play a crucial role in shaping the politics of the modern Middle East. By the beginning of the 20th century, Persia was no longer the powerful empire it had once been. Centuries of invasions, internal struggles, and foreign influence had weakened the country. Powerful European states such as Russia and Britain competed for influence over Persian territory, largely because of its strategic position between Europe, Central Asia, and the Indian Ocean. During the 19th century, Persia lost several wars against the Russian Empire. The Treaty of Gulistan in 1813 and the Treaty of Turkmenchay in 1828 forced Persia to surrender large territories in the Caucasus, including areas that are today part of Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. At the same time, British influence grew in the south, particularly after the discovery of oil in 1908, which made the region even more important to global powers. Amid this political instability, a military officer named Reza Khan seized power in 1921. 4 years later, in 1925, he crowned himself Reza Shah Pahlavi, founding a new dynasty and beginning a program of modernization. Reza Shah sought to transform the country into a modern state. He built railways, expanded the army, and introduced reforms in education and infrastructure. One of his most symbolic decisions came in 1935, when he requested that foreign governments stop using the name Persia and instead refer to the country as Iran, a name derived from an ancient word meaning land of the Aryans. Yet, modernization did not eliminate political tensions within the country. In 1953, a major turning point occurred. Iran's Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, attempted to nationalize the country's oil industry, which had long been dominated by British companies. In response, a coup supported by the CIA and British intelligence removed Mossadegh from power and strengthened the rule of Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, the son of Reza Shah. For many Iranians, the events of 1953 became a symbol of foreign interference in their nation's sovereignty. Over the next decades, dissatisfaction with the monarchy grew. Political repression, economic inequality, and opposition from religious leaders all contributed to rising tensions. These tensions exploded in 1979 with the Iranian Revolution. Led by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, the revolution overthrew the monarchy and established the Islamic Republic of Iran. For the first time in modern history, a state was created under the authority of Shia Islamic clerics. The revolution dramatically reshaped Middle Eastern politics. In 1980, Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein invaded Iran, beginning the Iran-Iraq War, which lasted until 1988 and caused enormous devastation on both sides. Despite the war and international pressure, the Islamic Republic survived. In the decades that followed, Iran expanded its influence across the Middle East through alliances with groups in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. Today, Iran remains one of the most influential and controversial powers in the region. Its rivalry with Saudi Arabia, tensions with Israel, and ongoing disputes with the United States continue to shape Middle Eastern politics. But when we look at these conflicts today, we are not just seeing modern geopolitics. We are witnessing the latest chapter in a story that began more than 2,500 years ago. From the rise of Cyrus the Great in 550 BCE, to the Arab conquest in 651 CE, to the Safavid decision in 1501 that made Iran a Shia state, to the Islamic Revolution of 1979, each moment added another layer to Iran's identity. Empire, religion, nation, all overlapping, all shaping the present, which means the conflicts of the Middle East today are not simply about modern politics. They are the continuation of a long historical struggle between power, faith, and identity, and the story of Iran is far from over.